Blood pooled beneath Dr. Rebecca Anderson's fingernails as she pressed her hands against the chest of her 7-year-old son, Benjamin, desperately trying to stem the flow of crimson that pulsed from the wound where the stagecoach wheel had crushed him. The year was 1878, and Ordway, Colorado was supposed to be their fresh start, not where she would watch her only child die despite all her medical training. "Breathe, Benny," she pleaded, her medical bag splayed open beside her on the dusty street. "Please, just breathe for Mama." Rebecca had saved countless lives in Boston: children with diphtheria, women with childbed fever, men with bullet wounds. She had studied at one of the few medical colleges accepting women and fought for her right to practice. Yet here, kneeling in the dirt of this frontier town, all her knowledge proved worthless as Benjamin's eyes grew distant and fixed on the endless Colorado sky. "I'm sorry, Dr. Anderson." Sheriff Mills placed a weathered hand on her shoulder as the small crowd of onlookers backed away, men removing their hats in solemn respect. "There ain't nothing more to be done." Rebecca couldn't release her blood-covered hands from her son's chest. Letting go meant accepting what she already knew, that the brilliant light that had guided her life for 7 years was extinguished. She'd come west after losing her husband to influenza 2 years prior, determined to start fresh where female doctors were needed. Now, she had no one. "Madam, let us help you get him." The sheriff's voice cracked. "No." The scream tore from her throat as she gathered Benjamin's broken body into her arms, not caring that his blood soaked through her dress. "I'm a doctor. I should have saved him." "I should have." Her words dissolved into guttural sobs that echoed down Ordway's Main Street. Among the crowd stood Forrest Hayes, his 11-year-old daughter Emma clutching his hand. He recognized the hollow devastation in Dr. Anderson's eyes. He'd seen it in his own reflection every day since his wife, Sarah, had died in childbirth 3 years earlier. The doctor's raw grief pulled at something long buried inside him. He'd heard tales of the lady doctor who'd arrived from back east, but their paths hadn't crossed until this terrible moment. "Emma, go to Mrs. Miller's. Tell her I'll be along later," Forrest instructed softly. "But Pa, please, darling." As his daughter reluctantly retreated, Forrest approached the grieving doctor. Without a word, he knelt in the dirt beside her, removed his coat, and gently draped it over the boy's body. Rebecca's tear-streaked face turned toward him, uncomprehending. "I know," he said simply. "I know what this is." 3 days later, Rebecca stood beside a small grave in Ordway's cemetery. She'd insisted on digging part of it herself despite the undertaker's protests. Her hands were raw and blistered, matching the state of her heart. Her black mourning dress hung loosely on her frame. She hadn't eaten since the accident. The townspeople had been kind, bringing food she couldn't touch and offering condolences she couldn't absorb. But none understood the particular torture of a healer who couldn't heal her own child. What purpose did her medical knowledge serve if it couldn't save the one life that mattered most? As the last of the mourners departed, Rebecca remained, unable to leave Benjamin alone in the cold ground. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows when she sensed someone approach and stand silently beside her. "Does it ever stop feeling like your insides are being torn out?" she asked without looking up, somehow knowing it was the tall rancher from the accident, the one with understanding eyes. "No," Forrest answered honestly. "But someday you'll wake up and your first thought won't be of him, and when that happens, the guilt will nearly kill you." Rebecca nodded, finally turning to look at him. "You lost someone, my wife, 3 years ago." He adjusted his hat. "Left me with Emma to raise. I thought I'd die too." "I wish I had," Rebecca whispered. "I know that feeling too," he said. "My ranch is 5 miles outside town. If you need anything," he stopped, realizing the inadequacy of his offer. What could he possibly give her that would matter? "Thank you, Mr. Hayes, Forrest Hayes. I'm Rebecca Anderson, though I suppose everyone knows that now," he nodded. Ordway's not big on secrets. A strange need to explain herself suddenly overcame Rebecca. "I'm a doctor, a real one with training and credentials. Not a midwife or herb woman. I know, Sheriff mentioned it. I've treated gunshot wounds, amputated limbs, delivered breech babies. But I couldn't," her voice broke. Forrest reached into his pocket and pulled out a small carved wooden horse. "Emma made this. She thought your boy might want something too. Well, to take with him." He placed it on the grave. The simple gesture of kindness from a child who understood loss broke something in Rebecca. She sank to her knees beside the fresh grave, one hand reaching for the wooden horse. "He loved horses," she managed. "Was always begging me for riding lessons." Forrest knelt beside her, not touching her but close enough that she felt his presence. "Emma's got a gentle mare. When you're ready, if you ever want to learn what he wanted to know, she'd be happy to teach you." Rebecca clutched the wooden horse. "I don't think I'll ever be ready for anything again." "You don't have to be. Not today." For weeks after the funeral, Rebecca remained in her small house at the edge of town, venturing out only when summoned for medical emergencies. The people of Ordway still needed a doctor, regardless of her personal tragedy, and work became her only escape from grief. She moved like a ghost through her routines, treating injuries and illness with mechanical precision while feeling nothing. At night, she would sit in Benjamin's room, surrounded by his possessions, trapped in memories of his laughter, his curious questions, his future that would never come. Early summer arrived, bringing relentless heat and an outbreak of fever among the children in town. Rebecca worked tirelessly, determined that no other mother would suffer her fate if she could prevent it. She hadn't seen Forrest Hayes since the funeral, though occasionally she spotted his daughter Emma in town, the girl's somber eyes following her with understanding beyond her years. On the fourth night of the fever outbreak, Rebecca stumbled toward home as dawn broke, exhausted after sitting vigil with the Cooper twins. Both children would recover, but the victory felt hollow. She was so lost in her thoughts that she nearly collided with a horse and rider approaching from the opposite direction. "Dr. Anderson." Forrest Hayes pulled his horse to a stop. His face was drawn with worry, his normally neat appearance disheveled. "Thank God. I was coming to find you." "Mr. Hayes, it's Emma. She's burning up, delirious, started last night. I tried the remedies my wife used to use, but nothing's helping." Rebecca's medical instincts instantly took over. "I'll need my bag, wait here." Minutes later, she was mounted behind him on his horse, her medical bag secured to the saddle. They rode in tense silence, Forrest pushing his horse to a pace just short of dangerous across the open prairie. The Hayes Ranch appeared on the horizon, a modest main house with several outbuildings, a corral and grazing land stretching into the distance. "How long has she had fever?" Rebecca asked clinically as they dismounted. "Started yesterday afternoon. Got worse after midnight." Forrest led her quickly into the house. "She was helping with the Marshall kids in town earlier this week. I reckon that's where she caught it." Emma lay in her bed, her face flushed crimson against white sheets. Rebecca immediately set to work, checking the girl's pulse, temperature, and responsiveness. The child's breathing was labored, and when Rebecca pressed a stethoscope to her chest, she heard the telltale congestion in the lungs. "She has the same fever that's going through town," Rebecca confirmed. "I need cool water, clean cloths, and whatever willow bark you might have." For the next several hours, Rebecca worked methodically to bring Emma's fever down. She mixed medicines from her supplies, applied cool compresses, and carefully monitored the girl's breathing. Forrest moved silently alongside her, following directions without question, his fear evident only in the tightness around his eyes. By midday, Emma's fever broke. The girl fell into a natural sleep rather than the restless unconsciousness of before. Rebecca sat back in the chair beside the bed, suddenly aware of her own exhaustion. "She'll sleep now," Rebecca said quietly. "The worst is past, but she'll need rest and plenty of fluids when she wakes." Forrest's shoulders sagged with relief. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice rough with emotion. "If I'd lost her too—" "You won't lose her," Rebecca assured him firmly. "Not to this fever, at least." Something unspoken passed between them, the acknowledgement that they both lived with the terrible understanding that children could be lost despite a parent's best efforts. That love wasn't always enough to protect them. "You must be exhausted," Forrest said. "Let me make you something to eat before you head back to town." Rebecca started to refuse, then realized she couldn't remember the last time she'd eaten. That would be, "Thank you." The Hayes kitchen was simple but orderly. Rebecca sat at the wooden table while Forrest prepared a meal of beans, biscuits, and coffee. The domesticity of the scene struck her as both foreign and achingly familiar. It reminded her of mornings with Benjamin, the simple routines that had structured their lives together. "You've done well with her," Rebecca observed as Forrest placed a plate before her. "Raising a girl alone can't be easy." "Nothing about it's been easy," he admitted. "Sarah, my wife, she was the heart of this place. After she died, I nearly sold up and left. But Emma loves the ranch, and it's all she has left of her mother." "How did your wife die?" Rebecca asked, then immediately regretted the intrusion. "I'm sorry, that's too personal." "No, it's all right." Forrest sat across from her with his own plate. "Childbed fever, our second baby. We lost them both." He stared into his coffee. "Doctor didn't get here in time from Trinidad. Might not have mattered anyway." Rebecca knew too well the devastation of puerperal fever. "I'm sorry. I've seen too many women lost that way. That's why folks here were glad to get a doctor in town, especially one who knows about women's troubles." He looked up at her. "You've already saved lives here, Dr. Anderson. The Watkins baby last month. Old man Peterson's gangrene. The Cooper twins." "But not my son," she whispered, the food forgotten. "No," Forrest agreed simply. "Just like I couldn't save Sarah. Sometimes I think that's the hardest lesson of living out here, learning what we can control and what we can't." Rebecca pushed her plate away, suddenly overwhelmed by the unexpected intimacy of their conversation. "I should check on Emma again." The girl was sleeping peacefully, her breathing easier. Rebecca placed a hand on her forehead. The fever was truly broken. As she adjusted the blankets, she noticed a small wooden horse on the bedside table, identical to the one Emma had sent for Benjamin's grave. "She makes them," Forrest explained from the doorway. "Started after Sarah died. Says horses carry people to heaven." Rebecca's throat tightened. "She's a remarkable child. She is." Pride softened his features. "You can take my bed to rest before heading back. I'll stay with Emma." "No, I should return to town. Other children need me." "You're dead on your feet, doctor. You'll be no good to anyone if you collapse." "Rest a few hours, then I'll take you back." Too exhausted to argue, Rebecca allowed herself to be led to the main bedroom. As soon as her head touched the pillow, she fell into a dreamless sleep, the first untroubled rest she'd had since Benjamin's death. She woke to the sound of quiet conversation and the smell of food cooking. Disoriented, she sat up to find the room bathed in early evening light. She'd slept for hours. After splashing water on her face from the basin, Rebecca made her way to the kitchen where Emma sat at the table, pale but alert, while Forrest prepared supper. "Dr. Anderson," Emma brightened. Pa said you saved my life. Your father did most of the work, Rebecca replied, smoothing her rumpled dress. He took very good care of you. Are you hungry? Forrest asked. Supper's nearly ready. I really should get back. Sheriff rode by an hour ago, Forrest interrupted. Said to tell you the fever cases are stable. No new ones since morning. Rebecca hesitated, then nodded. All right, thank you. They ate together, and Rebecca found herself drawn into conversation with Emma, who, despite her recent illness, was full of questions about medicine. The girl's intelligence and curiosity reminded Rebecca painfully of Benjamin, but for the first time, the memory didn't feel like a knife to her heart. Pa says you know how to deliver babies, Emma said between bites. I want to learn that someday. Emma, Forrest warned gently. It's all right, Rebecca assured him. Yes, I do. I trained at a women's medical college in Philadelphia before moving to Boston. Could you teach me? Emma asked eagerly. When I'm older, I mean. Rebecca felt something crack in the wall she'd built around herself. If your father approves, perhaps I could show you some basics of nursing. Emma turned pleading eyes to her father, who shrugged helplessly. We'll see. For now, you need to concentrate on getting well again. After supper, Forrest insisted on driving Rebecca back to town in his wagon. The evening was mild, stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky. They rode in comfortable silence for a while, the sounds of the prairie surrounding them. She likes you, Forrest said finally. Emma, I mean. She doesn't warm to many people these days. She's a special girl. You've done right by her. I try. He glanced at Rebecca. Would you really consider teaching her something of your profession? She's had this notion about healing ever since her mother died. Rebecca considered the question seriously. If she maintains interest as she grows, yes. The world needs more women in medicine. Thank you. It would mean a lot to her. He paused, then added, and to me. As they approached the outskirts of Ordway, Rebecca felt a curious reluctance to return to her empty house. The hours at the Hayes ranch had been the first time since Benjamin's death that she'd felt something other than crushing grief or numbing emptiness. Mr. Hayes, Forrest, please. Forrest, thank you for today, for trusting me with your daughter. He pulled the wagon to a stop in front of her house. Thank you for saving her. In the fading light, his eyes held hers. I know nothing can replace what you've lost, Dr. Anderson, but Ordway needs you, and if you ever need anything at all, you know where to find us. Rebecca nodded, unexpectedly moved. Rebecca, please call me Rebecca. As summer progressed into fall, Rebecca found herself gradually reconnecting with the world. The fever epidemic passed, and her practice settled into a rhythm of treating the everyday ailments and injuries of frontier life. She still visited Benjamin's grave daily, but now she sometimes told him about her patients or the changing seasons instead of only her grief. True to her word, she began teaching Emma basic medical knowledge when the girl had fully recovered. Every few weeks, Emma would come to town with her father, and Rebecca would show her how to make simple remedies or explain the workings of the human body using her medical texts. These visits became a bright spot in Rebecca's life. Forrest would often bring fresh vegetables from his garden or meat from his recent hunting, insisting it was payment for the lessons. Sometimes he would stay to talk while Emma worked, telling Rebecca stories of his life on the ranch or asking about her experiences as a doctor in the East. Do you ever miss it? He asked one crisp October afternoon as they sat on Rebecca's porch. Emma was inside, carefully copying anatomical drawings from a textbook. The city, I mean. Rebecca considered the question. I miss certain conveniences, running water, libraries. Proper medical supplies that don't take months to arrive. But not the people. I had colleagues, not friends. After my husband Daniel died, it became clear how isolated we'd been. She pulled her shawl tighter against the autumn chill. Benjamin was my world. I came west because I thought he deserved more than a mother who worked constantly and neighbors who saw us as curiosities. Forrest nodded. Sarah always said the same about city folk, that they live on top of each other but never truly see one another. Your wife sounds like she was very wise. She was. His expression grew distant. She grew up on this frontier, understood it in ways I'm still learning. I was a city boy who came west for adventure and stayed for love. Rebecca smiled. Where were you from? Philadelphia originally. My father was a banker. You gave up a comfortable life to become a rancher, Forrest laughed. Comfortable but suffocating. I wanted to build something with my own hands, not shuffle papers in an office like my father. His eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled. Sarah thought I was the most useless greenhorn she'd ever met when I started, took pity on me and taught me ranching. Their conversations grew more personal as autumn deepened toward winter. Rebecca found herself looking forward to the Hayes visits, with an anticipation that both comforted and alarmed her. She was not ready to acknowledge the warmth that Forrest's presence brought to her life, the way his quiet strength and Emma's bright spirit were slowly healing something she had thought permanently broken. Then came the early December blizzard that changed everything. The snow began mid-afternoon, earlier than predicted and with a ferocity that caught many unprepared. Rebecca had just finished treating Mr. Daniel's arthritic hands when Sheriff Mills burst into her office, snow crusting his beard. Doc, need you at the Wilkins place. Quick as you can. Martha's time has come early and there's complications. Rebecca immediately gathered her birthing supplies. How far along is she? Waters broke this morning, but nothing's happening. She's bleeding some, according to her husband. Rebecca's heart sank. The Wilkins homestead was nearly 7 miles out, and Martha was barely 8 months along with her first child. In this weather, got a sled rigged to my strongest horse. It's our only chance. The journey was brutal. Wind-driven snow reduced visibility to mere feet, and the temperature plummeted as darkness fell. Rebecca huddled beneath buffalo robes in the crude sled, clutching her medical bag to her chest and praying they wouldn't lose their way. They were within sight of the Wilkins cabin when disaster struck. The horse stumbled in a hidden ditch, throwing Sheriff Mills from the saddle. Rebecca heard his cry of pain as she was pitched forward into a snowbank. "Sheriff," she called, struggling to her feet. The horse had bolted, dragging the damaged sled behind it. Mills lay in the snow, his leg bent at an unnatural angle. "Broke my leg, Doc," he gasped through clenched teeth. "You gotta go on. Cabin's just beyond those trees." Rebecca was torn between patience. "I can't leave you here to freeze." "You must. Martha and that baby will die without you. I can make it a little farther." He pulled himself up on his good leg, using his rifle as a makeshift crutch. "Go." With a heavy heart, Rebecca grabbed her medical bag and pushed forward through thigh-deep snow. The 100 yards to the cabin might as well have been miles, but the thought of Martha Wilkins and her unborn child drove her onward. By the time she reached the cabin door, Rebecca was half frozen. Todd Wilkins yanked it open at her knock, his young face etched with terror. "Thank God." "Martha's bad off, Doc." The cabin's interior was stifling after the bitter cold outside. Martha lay on the bed, her face gray with exhaustion, nightgown soaked with blood. Rebecca shed her outer garments and quickly washed her hands in hot water. "Sheriff's injured," she informed Todd. "Broken leg about 100 yards back. You need to bring him here." While Todd ventured into the storm, Rebecca examined Martha. The situation was dire breech presentation with hemorrhaging. The young woman was barely conscious, her pulse weak and thready. "Martha, I need to turn the baby," Rebecca explained, already rolling up her sleeves. "It's going to hurt, but I must do it now to save you both." For the next hour, Rebecca fought against time and nature to save mother and child. She managed to turn the baby, but Martha was too weak to push effectively. Just as Rebecca prepared to use forceps, Todd returned with Sheriff Mills, both men nearly frozen. "Need your help," Rebecca called to Todd, not taking her eyes from her patient. "Now." With Todd supporting his wife and following Rebecca's instructions, they finally delivered a tiny, blue-tinged baby boy. For one terrible moment, the infant didn't breathe and Rebecca was instantly transported back to Ordway's Main Street, her hands covered in Benjamin's blood, powerless to save him. "No," she whispered fiercely. "Not this time." She cleared the baby's airways, rubbed his chest vigorously, and breathed gently into his tiny mouth. After an eternal moment, the infant gasped, then let out a weak cry. "He's alive," Todd sobbed, clutching his semi-conscious wife's hand. "Martha, our boy's alive." While Todd cradled his son, Rebecca worked to stop Martha's bleeding and stabilize her condition. Only when she was certain that mother and child would survive did she turn her attention to Sheriff Mills. Setting his broken leg was difficult work, but Mills endured it stoically. By the time Rebecca had splinted the limb properly, the storm outside had intensified to a full-blown blizzard. "No one's going anywhere tonight," Mills said grimly. "Maybe not tomorrow either, way this is blowing." Rebecca nodded, exhaustion washing over her as the adrenaline of the medical emergencies faded. She checked on Martha and the baby once more, then settled into a chair near the fire. Despite her best efforts to stay alert, she drifted into an uneasy sleep. She woke to the sound of pounding on the cabin door and Todd's voice raised in greeting. Sunlight streamed through the windows the storm had passed during the night. Disoriented, Rebecca sat up just as the door swung open to reveal Forrest Hayes, his face haggard with worry. "Rebecca." He crossed the small cabin in 2 strides, stopping just short of embracing her. "Thank God. When your house was empty and the sheriff missing, I feared the worst." "Forrest, how did you find us?" "Tracked the sheriff's horse back to town, then followed your trail once the storm cleared." His eyes moved from Rebecca to the other occupants of the cabin, taking in the scene. "Everyone all right here? Dr. Anderson saved my wife and son," Todd said proudly, gesturing to where Martha rested with the swaddled infant. "And the sheriff, too." Forrest's expression softened as he looked back at Rebecca. "Sounds like you've had quite a night, Doctor." "We need to get the sheriff back to town," Rebecca said, her professional demeanor reasserting itself despite her joy at seeing Forrest. "His leg needs proper care." "That's why I brought the wagon. Can get all of you back safely now." The journey to town was slow but uneventful in the bright winter sunshine. Sheriff Mills was deposited at his home where his wife could tend him, while Rebecca insisted on keeping Martha and the baby at her house for observation. Once the young family was settled in her spare room, Rebecca finally had a moment alone with Forrest. They stood in her kitchen, sudden awkwardness between them. "Thank you for coming after us," she said finally. "How did you know something was wrong?" "Emma and I rode in yesterday before the storm hit, when we couldn't find you and then the blizzard came." He removed his hat, turning it in his hands. "I was afraid I'd lost you too." The raw emotion in his voice struck Rebecca to her core. "Forrest, I know it's too soon," he interrupted. "I know you're still grieving Benjamin, just as I still mourn Sarah. But last night, thinking you might be lost in that storm, I realized I can't pretend any more that you're just Ordway's doctor or Emma's teacher." Rebecca felt tears well in her eyes. "I don't know if I can ever be whole again." "None of us who have lost like we have can be whole the way we were before," Forrest said gently. But perhaps broken pieces can fit together to make something new, something different but still worth having. He reached out slowly and took her hand, giving her every opportunity to pull away. Rebecca looked down at their joined hands, hers pale and smooth from medical work, his tanned and calloused from ranching. "I'm not asking for promises," he continued when she remained silent. "Just permission to care for you, to see where this might lead." Rebecca thought of Benjamin, of the life they'd planned in Ordway that had been cut so tragically short. She thought of all the patients she'd saved and the one she couldn't. And she thought of Forrest and Emma, how their presence had gradually become a lifeline pulling her back from the abyss of grief. "Yes," she whispered, finally meeting his eyes. "I'd like that." Winter in Colorado was harsh, but it brought unexpected gifts to Rebecca. With Martha and baby Joseph, named after Dr. Anderson, recovered and back at their homestead, Rebecca found herself spending more time with the Hayes family. Emma continued her informal medical education, showing a genuine aptitude that impressed Rebecca. Forrest courted her with careful patience, respecting her need to move slowly. Their first kiss came on a January evening after Forrest had escorted Rebecca home from treating a patient on the outskirts of town. Snow was falling gently, the world hushed and white around them as they stood on her porch. "I should go in," Rebecca said softly, though she made no move toward the door. "You should," Forrest agreed, equally motionless. In the golden light spilling from her window, Rebecca saw the question in his eyes. She nodded almost imperceptibly, and Forrest stepped closer, cupping her face with gentle hands. His lips touched hers tentatively at first, then with growing certainty as she responded. When they parted, Rebecca's heart was racing in a way that had nothing to do with fear or grief. "I didn't think I would ever feel this again," she admitted. Forrest brushed a strand of hair from her face. "Neither did I." By spring, their courtship was the talk of Ordway. Some whispered that it was too soon after Benjamin's death, but most recognized the healing that had taken place. Rebecca still visited her son's grave, but now she often brought fresh flowers and told him about her day with a smile rather than tears. Sometimes Emma accompanied her, the two of them sitting beside the small plot while Emma told stories about the animals on the ranch. In April, nearly a year after Benjamin's death, Forrest asked Rebecca to marry him. They stood beneath a cottonwood tree near the creek that ran through his property, the land beginning to green with new life. "I know we can never replace what we've lost," he said, holding both her hands in his. "But I've come to love you, Rebecca Anderson. You and I have both seen how quickly life can change, how precious each day is. I don't want to waste any more time pretending we're meant to face the future alone." Rebecca looked up at him, this man who had shown her that life could continue even after unbearable loss. "Benjamin will always be part of me," she said, "just as Sarah will always be part of you." "I wouldn't want it any other way," Forrest assured her. "They made us who we are. They brought us together in a strange way." "Yes," Rebecca said, her voice gaining strength. "Yes, I will marry you, Forrest Hayes." They were married in June 1879, a simple ceremony in Ordway's small church. Emma stood proudly beside them, beaming as she became officially what she had already become in heart, Rebecca's daughter. The town turned out in force to celebrate, even those who had initially gossiped about their relationship. "To new beginnings," Sheriff Mills toasted at the reception, his leg healed but with a permanent limp. "And to having a doctor in the family." Rebecca and Emma moved to the Hayes Ranch, where Rebecca set up a small infirmary in one of the outbuildings. Twice a week, she still rode into Ordway to see patients there, but increasingly people from outlying homesteads sought her out at the ranch. Life settled into a rhythm of work and family, of building something new while honoring what came before. Rebecca found unexpected joy in ranch life, the connection to the land, the animals, the changing seasons. Forrest proved an attentive husband, Emma a delightful daughter, and together they created a home filled with both laughter and the respectful remembrance of those they'd lost. On the first anniversary of Benjamin's death, the three of them rode to the cemetery together. Rebecca placed a carved wooden horse, Emma's work, next to the weathered one that had been there since the funeral. "I think he would have liked it here," Rebecca said, looking out over the prairie stretching to the distant mountains. "He always wanted adventure." "He had your spirit," Forrest said, his arm around her shoulders. "Emma has that same spark." Emma, now 12, looked up from arranging wildflowers on the grave. "Do you think he would have liked me?" Rebecca's heart swelled with love for this child who so carefully considered the feelings of a brother she'd never known. "He would have adored you. You would have been thick as thieves, getting into all sorts of trouble together." They spent the afternoon by the grave, not in grief but in celebration of Benjamin's short life. Rebecca told stories of his antics in Boston, his excitement about coming west, the way he'd collected interesting rocks and insects. It was the first time she'd been able to speak so freely of him without being overcome by sorrow. As they rode home in the golden light of late afternoon, Rebecca felt a profound sense of peace. The ache of Benjamin's loss would never disappear completely, but it had become part of the tapestry of her life rather than its defining feature. That night, after Emma had gone to bed, Rebecca sat with Forrest on the porch of their home. The stars emerged one by one in the vast Colorado sky as they rocked gently side by side. "I have something to tell you," Rebecca said, her voice steady despite the flutter of nervousness in her stomach. Forrest turned to her, eyebrows raised in question. "I'm with child," she said. "About 3 months along, by my estimation." Forrest froze for a moment, then slowly knelt before her chair, taking her hands in his. "Are you certain?" Rebecca nodded. "I've been watching for the signs. I wanted to be sure before I told you." "Rebecca." His voice was thick with emotion. I never thought." "I know." She squeezed his hands. "I'm 40 years old. I thought my chance for another child had passed, and after losing Benjamin, part of me was afraid to even want this." "Are you afraid now?" he asked gently. "Yes," she admitted. But not enough to let fear overshadow joy. She brought his hand to rest on her still flat stomach. "This child won't replace Benjamin or Sarah's baby. They'll be themselves, whoever they're meant to be." Forrest's eyes glistened with unshed tears. "Emma will be beside herself." "We'll tell her tomorrow," Rebecca decided. "Tonight I just wanted it to be us." He kissed her then, tenderly and with reverence. "Thank you for this second chance, for showing me that life truly can go on even when you think it's ended." "You showed me that first," Rebecca reminded him. "When I was drowning in grief, you and Emma threw me a lifeline." They held each other under the stars, contemplating the future unfolding before them, unexpected, unplanned, but infinitely precious. The pregnancy progressed without complications, though Rebecca was acutely aware of the risks of childbirth at her age. She continued her medical practice, though she gradually reduced her hours as her condition became more apparent. Emma proved an enthusiastic assistant, eager to help prepare for her new sibling while continuing her medical education. As Rebecca's time drew near in early November, the entire Hayes household prepared with a mixture of excitement and trepidation. Forrest rarely left the ranch, ensuring he would be present when labor began. Emma obsessively organized the nursery they had prepared, arranging and rearranging the baby clothes and supplies. Labor began on a crisp autumn morning as Rebecca was collecting eggs from the henhouse. The first contraction caused her to gasp and clutch the edge of a nesting box, eggs forgotten. By the time she made it back to the house, There was no doubt that her time had come. "Is it the baby?" Emma asked anxiously when Rebecca paused in the kitchen doorway, breathing through another contraction. "Yes, find your father. He's mending fences in the north pasture." While Emma raced to fetch Forrest, Rebecca calmly prepared for what was to come. She had arranged weeks earlier for Martha Wilkins to attend her as midwife, a role reversal that both women found fitting. A ranch hand was dispatched to the Wilkins homestead with news that Dr. Anderson's labor had begun. By the time Forrest arrived, Rebecca had changed into a birthing gown and was walking slowly around the bedroom, pausing to breathe through each contraction. "You're so calm," he marveled, his own face pale with worry. Rebecca managed a smile. "I've delivered hundreds of babies, remember. Though I admit it's different from this side of things." Martha arrived an hour later, baby Joseph on her hip. The infant, now nearly a year old, was thriving, living proof of Rebecca's skills. "Seems right that I should help bring your child into the world," Martha said, handing Joseph to Emma. "After what you did for us." The labor progressed steadily through the afternoon and into evening. Rebecca focused on her breathing, on the techniques she had taught countless women. Forrest remained by her side, supporting her through each contraction, his strength unwavering despite his evident fear. As night fell, the contractions intensified. Rebecca, despite her medical knowledge, or perhaps because of it, began to fear complications. The baby was large, the labor long for a woman of her age. "Something's not right," she gasped after a particularly painful contraction. "The baby should have descended further by now." Martha checked her with capable hands. "Baby's turned sideways a bit." Not a full breach, but enough to slow things down. Rebecca knew what needed to be done. "You'll have to turn the child. I can talk you through it." You can do this," Rebecca assured her through gritted teeth. "I trust you." The next hour was the most difficult of Rebecca's life. The pain of Martha's manipulations, guided by Rebecca's instructions, was nearly unbearable. Forrest held her tightly, murmuring encouragements, his shirt soaked with her sweat and tears. Just when Rebecca's strength was failing, she felt the baby shift into the proper position. "Now," she cried. "It's time to push." 3 tremendous efforts later, their child slipped into the world with a lusty cry that filled the room. Martha worked quickly, clearing airways, cutting the cord, then placing the squirming infant on Rebecca's chest. "A boy," Forrest whispered in awe. "We have a son." Rebecca gazed down at the red-faced, dark-haired newborn, overwhelming love washing through her. "Daniel Benjamin Hayes," she said softly. "For both the fathers he'll never meet." Forrest's arms encircled them both. "It's perfect. He's perfect." Emma was allowed in to meet her brother, her eyes wide with wonder as she gently touched his tiny hand. "He looks like you, Pa," she declared, "but he has Rebecca's nose." "Poor child," Rebecca laughed weakly. "It's a fine nose," Forrest insisted, kissing it to prove his point. "The finest in Colorado territory." In the days that followed, Rebecca recovered her strength while adjusting to motherhood once more. The memories of Benjamin as an infant were bittersweet, but holding Daniel gave them a poignant beauty rather than sharp pain. On Daniel's 1-month birthday, Rebecca bundled him warmly and took him to visit Benjamin's grave. Forrest had offered to accompany her, but she had asked for this moment alone with her sons, one in her arms, one in the earth. "This is your brother," she told Daniel, who slept peacefully against her chest. "Benjamin would have been such a wonderful big brother to you. I want you to know about him as you grow, to understand that love doesn't end when someone leaves us." She sat beside the grave, telling Benjamin about his new brother, about the ranch, about the family that had expanded to include her. When Daniel woke and began to fuss, she nursed him there beneath the winter sky, feeling a profound connection between past and future. "Thank you," she whispered, though whether to Benjamin, to Forrest, to fate, or to God she couldn't have said. Perhaps to all of them, for the second chance she had never expected. As spring arrived once more, the Hayes ranch flourished. Daniel grew stronger daily. Emma continued her informal medical studies while excelling in school, and Forrest expanded their cattle operation with Rebecca's full support. Rebecca herself had found a balance between motherhood, marriage, and medicine that fulfilled all parts of her being. On warm evenings, the family would often gather on the porch after supper. Emma would read aloud from her schoolbooks or medical texts, Daniel would sleep in Rebecca's arms, and Forrest would watch them all with quiet contentment. Did you ever imagine this? Rebecca asked him one such evening as the sunset painted the prairie in shades of gold and purple. When we met that terrible day in town, Forrest considered the question. "No," he admitted. "That day, I only knew that I recognized your pain because it matched my own. I couldn't have dreamed where that recognition would lead us. I thought my life was over when Benjamin died," Rebecca said softly, looking down at Daniel's sleeping face. "I couldn't see beyond that moment." "I felt the same when Sarah died," Forrest agreed. "But time has a way of moving forward whether we're ready or not." Emma looked up from her book. "I'm glad time brought us all together," she said simply. Rebecca smiled at her stepdaughter. "So am I, Emma, so am I." Later that night, with the children asleep and the house quiet, Rebecca and Forrest lay together in the darkness of their bedroom. His hand rested protectively over her heart, her head tucked beneath his chin. "I've been thinking," she said, "about expanding the infirmary, making it a proper clinic to serve the outlying ranches, perhaps even training a few local girls who show aptitude like Emma." Ordway's own medical school, Forrest sounded amused but approving, on a very small scale. "But yes, something like that. You should do it," he encouraged. "This territory needs more healers." Rebecca traced patterns on his arm. "It would mean spending some of our savings. Money well spent. Besides, the ranch is doing well enough to support your plans." She tilted her face up to his in the darkness. "Thank you for understanding how important this is to me. Your healing is a gift, Rebecca, not just to our family or to Ordway, but to you. It's part of who you are." His voice grew softer. "I would never ask you to be less than everything you're meant to be." Rebecca kissed him, overwhelmed by gratitude for this man who had helped her find her way back to life. "I love you," she whispered against his lips, "more than I ever thought possible to love again." "And I love you," he responded, "every day a little more than the day before." As they drifted toward sleep, Rebecca reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. The path had been marked by unimaginable loss, by grief that had nearly destroyed her. But it had also led to unexpected joy, to a family reconstructed from broken pieces, to love that had healed wounds she'd thought would never close. Benjamin would always be her firstborn, her heart's first love. But the life she now lived with Forrest, Emma, and Daniel was rich with purpose and connection. The woman doctor who couldn't save her own child had learned that while some losses could never be undone, life itself insisted on continuing. And in that continuation lay the possibility of renewal, of fresh beginnings, of love that transformed even the deepest sorrow into something bearable and eventually into something beautiful.